welcome back to another episode of What the Why with Barbara Ann on RVN Television. If you haven't seen us before, our show features conversations with diverse leaders from all walks of life about why they do what they do and how they figured things out. Maybe you're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, or you feel stuck and you want to get unstuck in your business or your job or maybe even in your life. All of our guests have something in common with you. At some point in their lives, they felt similarly, or they went through some kind of a pivotal experience. And today is no exception. Please join me in welcoming Terry Tucker, the founder of Motivational Check LLC. Terry is among the most inspiring people I've had the privilege to meet. Terry is a motivational speaker, author, and international podcast guest on the topics of motivation, mindset, and self-development. He has a business administration degree from the Citadel, where he also played NCAA Division I college basketball, and a master's degree from Boston University. In his professional career, Terry has been a marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a SWAT team hostage negotiator, a high school basketball coach, a business owner, and a motivational speaker. And for the past 11 years, he's been a cancer warrior, a battle that resulted in the amputation of his foot in 2018 and his leg in 2020. But that did not take away his spirit or ability to motivate and inspire others. Terry is the author of the book Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. Terry has also been featured in Authority, Thrive Global, and Human Capital Leadership magazines, along with being quoted and featured in a new book titled Audaciousness, Your Journey to Living a Bold and Authentic Life by Maribel Ortega and Helen Strong. I'm so excited and honored to have Terry joining us live from Colorado via Zoom. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Terry Tucker to our show. So, yay! Round of applause. So welcome.
Thank you, Barbara Ann. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Me too. And as I explained to all of our hosts and as our guests know, after reading through the bio of the person that we're getting ready to interview, sometimes we kind of take a stop and take a deep breath and pause because of everything they've done, and you have done a lot. The first question I ask every guest is, okay, this is where you are, but what did you want to be when you were little, Terry, growing up?
I honestly wanted to be a policeman. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954 and was actually shot in the line of duty. I didn't want that part of the job, but was actually shot in the line of duty. It was not a serious injury, was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going down the path my grandfather took, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted me to do. And my father was dying of cancer when I graduated from college, so I had a decision to make. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail and go into law enforcement, or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding that backstory, my resume makes a little bit more sense now, but I always wanted to be a police officer. It was just something that I knew was in my soul.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you did some of that with the SWAT team hostage negotiator. How does one become a SWAT team hostage negotiator?
Yeah, usually your next door neighbor's not a SWAT negotiator, and that. So it was usually on law enforcement departments. The SWAT team are usually the better officers. They get really good training, the latest equipment, and I've always wanted to be the best in my life. So when there was an opening as a negotiator, I put in for it, and I had to do what everybody else had to do. I had to run 1.5 miles in a certain time, do so many push-ups and sit-ups, meet with the psychologist that was part of the team, and meet with the command staff, and then meet with the team. And it was an all or nothing thing. If everybody gave you the thumbs up, you got on. But if one person said, I don't like Terry, or I've worked with him before and he's not easy to work with, you didn't get on the team. And so I went through all that and eventually got the thumbs up. And that started my 4.5-year career as a SWAT negotiator.
Wow. Now, before that, yes, you had to run, but you were an NCAA Division I college basketball player while you were at the Citadel. So you went from the Citadel, then you got your master's. Now, where did hospital administrator and marketing executive fall in the continuum with SWAT team hostage negotiator?
Yeah, so my first job out of college was in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International in the marketing department with them. Was there for about 3.5 years, and then I made a pivot and became a hospital administrator. My grandmother and my father were both dying of different forms of cancer when I graduated from college, and so I ended up living at home for the next 3.5 years to help my mom care for them. And so I started out at Wendy's, but then, in all honesty, they were in and out of the hospital so much, I eventually went to work for the hospital where they were treated, and they both eventually passed away. And then, pretty late in life, I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer. I made another major pivot and got out of the private sector and got into law enforcement. Wow. And so I don't mean to sound conceited, but it's really one of the things that I'm most proud of in looking at my life is that I never let my dream, I never let my purpose die. Mm-hmm. I did it a little late in life. Like I said, 37 years old is a little late to be getting into law enforcement, but I had experience. I had the opportunity to work with some great people in the private sector, excuse me, which allowed me, I think, to be a better police officer when that happened.
No, I think that's awesome. And not just because there's a show about someone who kind of sort of did that similarly, but your path is actually more interesting. They say that truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. And I think it's phenomenal that you did that. So now, where did high school basketball coach and business owner fall into that space?
So after I finished my law enforcement career, I started a school security consulting business. I worked with private independent schools around the United States to assess their physical security, write their policies and procedures, and train their staff on critical incident management. And at the same time, I was coaching girls high school basketball. And the interesting thing about that is that I have two brothers, so I have no sisters. Never had a sister. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, and when I went to the Citadel, it's co-ed now, but it was an all-male military college. Mm-hmm. So when coaching girls high school basketball was certainly interesting for me. My wife and I have one child, a daughter, and I remember when we went to the OBGYN, the doctor said, "Would you like to know what sex the baby is?" And we said, "Sure." And she said, "You should buy pink." And I was like, "Oh, no. You need to leave it in there till it's done because I have absolutely no idea how to raise a girl." But, my daughter and I have an incredibly close relationship, but it was just different for me. I think I learned as much coaching girls as hopefully they learned from me about basketball and character and winning and losing and things like that. So it was a great experience for me, but it was also an incredible learning experience for me as well.
So you're doing all these amazing things, you follow through, you live into your purpose, you go into law enforcement, you've been a coach, and there's a history of cancer in your family, and then you find that, unfortunately, that becomes reality for you as well. When did you first find out?
Yeah, when I was coaching, I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe, and initially didn't think much of it because as a coach you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine, and he took an X-ray and he said, "Terry, I think you have a cyst within that callus, and I can cut it out." And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sack with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received that call that I think we all dread. And it was interesting because the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming, until he kind of hit me right between the eyes. He said, "Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma, and most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun. It affects the melon, the pigment in our skin. This has nothing to do with sun exposure. This is just a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet and the palms of the hands. And just for educational purposes, there's also another form that either appears in the eye or in your mucous membrane, so in your nose or your mouth, but it's still melanoma." And that started my 11 and a half year odyssey now through cancer. I was told when I was diagnosed that I would be lucky to live 2 years, that they had nothing to offer me other than surgery. If tumors popped up somewhere they could cut them out, they would cut them out. Otherwise, they had absolutely nothing that they could do for me. So I was given a death sentence back in 2012 and thought, you know what, maybe I can turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's what I've been doing for the last 11 and a half years.
Which is one of the reasons why I referred to you as one of the most inspirational guests that I've met. There's a doctor on our network who often says he doesn't even want to hear about diagnoses because that puts ideas into people's brains. And you figured that out all on your own, that you were going to live the life that you were going to live the life.
I think so. I mean, doctors, it's kind of like Vegas. They play the odds. They know that a person your age with your stage of cancer is probably going to live X number of years. And they tell you that. But what the doctors don't know is they don't know your heart. They don't know your mind. They don't know your soul. They don't know that you want to see your daughter graduate from high school or graduate from college or walk her down the aisle. They don't know that. And those things are incredibly powerful to help people keep going and to live for something. They've got something down the road that they're living for. And it's amazing how many people, when you have something to live for, it's amazing how somehow you just seem to always get to that point in your life.
Yeah. So believe it or not, we are already at the halfway point. Time for a break for our sponsors. So audience, please come back after our commercial break for more of What the Why with Barbara Ann and today's really amazing guest, Terry Tucker. Welcome back to What the Why with Barbara Ann on RVN Television and today's very special guest, Terry Tucker. And before the break, we were talking about the fact that he had been given a death sentence and he decided that, nope, he was taking the life sentence route. He was not ready to go. But knowing what your parents had been through and being witness to that, to the point that you actually went into hospital administration for a period of time, how did you find the courage to stand up and say, yeah, you might have an idea of where I'm going, but I'm not ready yet?
That's a great question. And I think I have to go back to when I graduated from college and my father was dying of cancer. My father had end-stage breast cancer back in the 1980s. And back then, they really didn't know how to treat a man with breast cancer. And so they pretty much told him to go home and die. And he lived another 3.5 years, and I believe he did because he had a purpose. His job was real estate. He loved real estate. And he actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, well, when it's my turn in the barrel, I need to make sure I have a purpose in life. And that's, I think, what I've done. And I think a lot of times we talk about purpose in the singular. And at least from my perspective, I think we have purposes in life. When I was younger, it was sports, it was athletics, it was basketball. And then as we talked about, it was law enforcement. And now that, in all honesty, I'm probably coming towards the end of my life, my purpose has changed again to put as much goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world as I possibly can. So it was really, I had to have something to do. If you don't, you just sit around and think how horrible things are, and that doesn't do you any good whatsoever. You've got to have a purpose to get through something like this.
100% agree. Actually, if there was such a thing as 1,000%, I would say 1,000% agree. So part of that purpose involves the fact that you are now a motivational speaker and you've written a book. Let's talk about your book, Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. I think it kind of gives a little bit of hint at the content, but if you could just give us an overview of what your book explains.
Sure. So Sustainable Excellence was really a book born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school, had moved to Colorado with her fiance, and my wife and I had dinner with them one night. And after dinner, I remember saying to her, you know, I was really excited that you were living close and that I could watch her find and live her purpose. And she got real quiet for a while, and then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and living that reason. That was the first conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me on social media from college, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And Barbara Ann, I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. I didn't want to give him the sort of the cliches that we all know. And so I spent some time, and eventually I had these sort of 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, I've got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So back in 2020, I had my leg amputated as part of my cancer journey. While I was healing after that amputation, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how Sustainable Excellence came to be.
I love it. And not just because my company is literally called Purposeful Solutions and Evolutions, but because I love everything that you stand for. And I imagine there are a lot of people out there who've really been moved and connected with your story on so many levels. To the extent that you are comfortable sharing, can share, what has been the receipt of the message that you have been sharing?
Yeah, it's been overwhelming. Whether it's the book or whether I'm speaking either virtually or in person with a group, the message is well received. And I think we all think, and I hate these words, imposter syndrome, that our message, that our life doesn't have a purpose, doesn't have a meaning. And I remember reading an article recently that said 83% of Americans feel that they have a book inside them, either a memoir or a fiction book. And less than 1% of those people will ever write that book. And I think that's such a shame. I think that we all have value. We all contribute something to this world. And I'll give you a quick story. I'm still being cared for the tumors I have in my lungs. And I had a nurse who, when I initially met her, was already a nurse, but she was learning how to do things on the unit where I'm treated. And she's about 25 years old. And about 6 months later, excuse me, she came in, she was taking care of me. She said, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I'm really uncomfortable telling it to you. And I didn't know how to respond to that. I said, well, it sounds like I might enjoy hearing the story. I hope you decide you want to tell me. So she's in and out over the next couple hours helping me out. And then she comes in, she sits down, she says, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a very dark place. I talked it over with my mom and dad. I was going to leave nursing and go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you. And I see what you go through. I see all the things that you've had in your life. I went back in the file and I read your story. And she said, when I finished reading it, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had had a positive impact on her. I guarantee everybody who's listening to us, there's people out there that are sort of watching you from afar on the courage that you display in dealing with your own adversity in life. So never think that your life doesn't matter, that your life doesn't have a purpose. I guarantee you there are people out there that would give everything they own just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes.
Yeah, you're absolutely, again, if there was such a thing as 1,000%, I would say you're 1,000% correct. Everything that you're saying is everything that I believe in and stand for, and it's why we do this show. It is why we do this show and why we cover the topics that we cover. Is because everybody has something to contribute, and it's possible to figure that out. Whether it's to join the police SWAT team in their late 30s, or to share their cancer journey so that others can be inspired and receive hope, or continue to serving in their profession. What's one thing you wish you knew as you started sharing your story with others, and looking back?
I guess I'll answer that question with this story. You know, I think we spend a lot of time working on this body. You know, we go to the gym, we get enough rest, we eat right, we reduce stress. We know what we need to do to be healthy with our bodies. But what I've found is that's great. But what we don't work on are the most important things in our life: our heart, our mind, and our soul. We spend a lot of time working on this body, but we know this body's going to die, it's going to decay, and it's going to go away. What lives on, what is eternal, is our heart, our mind, and our soul. And I think we should spend more time working on that. I'm not saying you shouldn't go to the gym and eat right and all that stuff. You absolutely should do that. But every day, spend a little more time working on who you really are: your heart, your mind, and your soul. If you do that, all of a sudden, things open up. You see the bigger picture in life. You see what's important. You know, people have asked me, you know, you played college basketball, you were a SWAT team negotiator, and then you lost your leg. And how do you deal with that? And my response has always been, when you can't do what you're good at, you do what's important. And what's important in life is not all this stuff that we got. What's important in life is connecting with each other, is loving each other, is caring for each other. And I think if you spend more time on that, all of a sudden you have all kinds of courage to handle whatever adversity you have to handle in life.
Literally words to live by. As you move forward, it's interesting, you know, none of us knows when our time comes. Some of us sometimes have a little bit of a hint, myself included, for very, very different reasons. But, you know, how is your family at this point, knowing that you've been on this journey and that at some point, you know, there is going to be a new way of living into the future?
Yeah, that's, you know, it's interesting. When I had my leg amputated, I found these tumors in my lungs. I went with my wife to the mortuary and to the cemetery and to the church, and I planned my funeral. And because I do podcasts about motivation and I speak about motivation, I actually got some brushback from people who commented that somehow planning my funeral was in some way defeatist. And I had to remind these folks that the last time I checked, we're all going to die. Don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now. Every one of us is going to die, but not every one of us is really going to live. And I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that I absolutely love. And it goes like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not looking to hasten my demise in any way, shape, or form. But death is not nearly as scary for me, I think, as it is for other people, because I believe I found my purposes in life and I live them.
I love it. I absolutely love it. You know, it's interesting. In some of my family, we don't even have a funeral. We have a going home celebration. And fortunately, interviews like this, your inspiration will continue to live on. And it has truly been an honor. If anyone would like to get in contact with you, because you're not gone yet.
Nope, not at all.
So what's the best way for people to reach out and connect with you?
So I have a blog. It's called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day, and with that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you could apply it in your life. On Mondays I put up the Monday morning motivational message. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Awesome. And thank you again. And one thing I will share with you that even our station owner doesn't know, you are one of the reasons why I decided to continue and make the investment in doing a third season. It's because of stories like yours. So your story will live on. So thank you so much for being here with us today. It's really appreciated.
Well, Barbara Ann, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks. So, as for our upcoming guests, I know it's going to be a little hard to top. We have a lot of them because, as you just heard, we're booked all the way through March for our second season, and we are going to have a third season coming up. And our guests for the rest of the second season include business owners and coaches and authors and technology experts, entrepreneurs. I got a former professional skier and some other folks that overcame seemingly insurmountable challenges. So please believe me when I say you really don't want to miss what any of our future guests have to say about their journeys. And if you miss any of our past guests and want to check out what they had to say, you can catch all of season 1 and 2 on demand on the What the Why page of RVN Television's website. You have so many viewing choices these days, so thank you very much for watching our show, and please tell a friend or colleague about us. As a reminder, What the Why airs on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as 3:30 p.m. on Mondays Eastern Standard Time, on rvntelevision.com, as well as Roku, and coming soon to other platforms. And also, as a reminder, whether you're looking to make a change in your life, no matter how big or small, please tune in again for more informative, inspirational, purpose-filled, and mission-oriented conversations with guests such as Terry, who overcame whatever challenges lay in their path to accept their new purpose in life and live it.